Hey ya. Andre Thompson stood before the mirror, adjusting his lime green bow tie for the umpteenth time. His reflection stared back at him, a mix of excitement and trepidation swirling in his dark eyes. Today was supposed to be the happiest day of his life, wasn't it? Then why did he feel like his heart was trying to escape his chest, not in a good way? The door to the dressing room creaked open, and his best friend, Benjamin Big Boy Patterson, poked his head in. "You ready, Dre? It's almost time." Andre nodded, more to convince himself than to answer Big Boy. "Yeah, man. Just give me a minute." Andre's mind wandered back to how he got here, as the door closed. It had been a whirlwind romance with Jade, his high school sweetheart. They'd been together for 8 years, through college and the start of their careers. Everyone said they were perfect together, that it was only a matter of time before they tied the knot. And here they were, about to do just that. But something felt off. If Andre was honest with himself, it had for a while now. The spark, the passion that had once burned so bright between them, had dimmed to a flicker. They'd fallen into a comfortable routine, going through the motions of a relationship without connecting anymore. Andre shook his head, trying to dispel the doubts. This was just pre-wedding jitters, right? Everyone got cold feet before the big day. It didn't mean anything. A knock at the door jolted him from his thoughts. 5 minutes, Mr. Thompson, called the wedding coordinator's cheerful voice. Taking a deep breath, Andre straightened his jacket and headed for the door. As he stepped into the hallway, he nearly collided with a whirlwind of purple fabric and flowery perfume. "Oh. I'm so sorry." The girl steadied herself, looking up at Andre with wide, apologetic eyes. "I wasn't watching where I was going." Andre stared into the most captivating, hazel eyes he'd ever seen. They belonged to a young woman with curly brown hair and freckles across her nose. She wore a purple dress that hugged her curves in all the right places, and Andre suddenly felt like all the air had been sucked out of the room. No, it's my fault," he stammered. "I was in a rush and—" "Andre. What are you doing?" Jade's voice cut through the moment like a knife. She stood at the end of the hallway, resplendent in her white gown, with a puzzled expression. Reality came crashing back. Andre mumbled another apology to the girl in purple, and hurried to join his bride-to-be. As they walked arm in arm towards the ceremony, he couldn't shake the feeling that something monumental had just happened. The wedding march began, and Andre stood at the altar watching Jade glide down the aisle. She was beautiful, of course. But as he looked at her, all he could think about were those hazel eyes and that purple dress. The officiant began the ceremony, his words washing over Andre in a haze. He went through the motions, saying his lines at the right moments, but his mind was elsewhere. When it came time for the vows, Andre opened his mouth to recite the words he'd practiced for weeks, but nothing came out. A hush fell over the gathered friends and family. Jade looked at him expectantly, her smile faltering slightly. Andre tried again, but the words stuck in his throat. At that moment, with everyone's eyes on him, he had a sudden crystal-clear realization: he couldn't do this. His heart was pounding, his mind racing, and he knew he had to follow his heart, even if it meant disappointing everyone. I'm sorry," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I can't." Gasps and murmurs rippled through the crowd. Jade's face crumpled in confusion and hurt. "What do you mean you can't?" Andre took a step back, his heart racing. "I mean, I can't marry you, Jade. I'm so sorry, but this isn't right. We're not right." He struggled to find the right words, but he knew he couldn't go through with the wedding. He loved Jade, but not in the way he should for a lifelong commitment. The next few minutes were a blur of shocked faces, angry relatives, and Jade's tearful accusations. Andrei felt terrible for hurting her, but at the same time, an enormous weight had lifted from his shoulders. He'd known, deep down, that they'd been drifting apart for years. It had just taken this moment of crisis for him to admit it, and now, he felt a sense of freedom he hadn't known in years. As he fled the church, leaving chaos in his wake, Andrei caught a glimpse of purple in his peripheral vision. The girl from the hallway stood off to the side, watching the scene unfold with wide eyes. For a brief moment their gazes locked, and Andrei felt a jolt of electricity run through him. He was leaving behind a life of chaos and confusion, but in that moment, he felt a sense of clarity he hadn't felt in a long time. Then he was out the door, and into the bright Atlanta sunshine, his legs carrying him away from the life he'd almost committed to out of habit and expectation. Andrei wandered the streets for hours, ignoring the dozens of missed calls and messages flooding his phone. As the sun set, he found himself in a small park, collapsed on a bench, his head in his hands. "You look like you could use this," a familiar voice said. Andrei looked up to see the girl in the purple dress standing before him, holding out a cup of coffee. He accepted it gratefully, taking a long sip before asking, "Why are you here?" She shrugged, sitting down next to him. "I saw you run out of the church. Figured you might need a friend." "We don't even know each other," Andrei pointed out. "I'm Lena," she said, holding out her hand. "There. Now we're not strangers anymore." Despite everything, Andrei found himself chuckling as he shook her hand. "Andrei. Nice to meet you, Lena." They sat in companionable silence for a while, sipping their coffee and watching the sky turn from orange to deep blue. Finally, Lena spoke. "So, want to talk about it?" Andrei sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I just blew up my entire life. After 8 years with Jade, all our plans for the future are gone. And the crazy thing is, I think I'm more relieved than upset." Lena nodded thoughtfully. Sometimes the hardest thing and the right thing are the same. It takes guts to walk away from something that isn't working, even if it's comfortable. "Yeah, but what do I do now?" Andrei asked, feeling lost. Lena stood up suddenly, holding out her hand. "You live. Come on, I know where to help you forget your troubles." Intrigued with nothing left to lose, Andrei took her hand and let her lead him through the darkening streets. They ended up at a hole-in-the-wall club, the bass from inside vibrating through the sidewalk. "Trust me," Lena said with a mischievous grin, pulling him inside. The club was packed, bodies moving in sync to the pulsing beat. Lena dragged Andrei onto the dance floor. Before he knew it, he was lost in the music. For the first time in years he felt truly free, letting the rhythm guide his movements without care. As they danced, Andrei couldn't take his eyes off Lena. She moved with an infectious joy, her curls bouncing and her eyes sparkling in the flashing lights. He found himself drawn to her, their bodies moving closer and closer, until they were practically one entity on the dance floor. The night flew by in a whirlwind of music, laughter, and stolen glances. As the club began to empty in the early morning hours, Andrei and Lena stumbled out onto the street, breathless and giddy. "That was wow," Andrei said, still riding the night's high. Lena grinned, linking her arm through his. "See? I told you it would help you forget your troubles." They wandered through the quiet streets, neither wanting the night to end. As they passed a 24-hour diner, Lena tugged on Andrei's arm. "Come on, I'm starving. My treat, since you're probably broke after paying for a wedding that didn't happen." Over plates of greasy eggs and hash browns they talked for hours. Andrei learned that Lena was a music teacher, with dreams of starting her record label. She'd been at the wedding as a +1 for one of Jade's cousins, a guy she'd gone on precisely 2 dates with, before realizing there was no spark. Guess it was a good thing it didn't work out with him, Andrei said, surprising himself with his boldness. Lena's cheeks flushed slightly as she met his gaze. Yeah, I guess it was. As the sun began to rise, painting the sky in soft pinks and oranges, they finally parted ways. But only after exchanging numbers and a promise to meet again soon. Over the next few weeks, Andrei's life underwent a massive transformation. He moved out of the apartment he'd shared with Jade, crashing on Big Boy's couch while he figured things out. He threw himself into his music, writing songs that poured out of him with an intensity he hadn't felt in years. And through it all, there was Lena. They met for coffee, went to concerts and spent long nights discussing their dreams and fears. Andrei opened up to her in ways he never had with anyone, not Jade. One night, about a month after the wedding that wasn't, Andrei and Lena were sitting on the roof of her apartment building, a bottle of wine between them as they gazed at the stars. "You know," Lena said, her voice soft in the night air, "when I saw you in that hallway on your wedding day, something just clicked. I felt like I'd known you my whole life." Andrei turned to look at her, his heart racing. "I felt it too. It scared the hell out of me, honestly. Still does." Lena scooted closer, her hand finding his. "Why does it scare you?" "Because," Andrei said, his voice barely above a whisper, "I've never felt this way about anyone before. Not even Jade. And after everything that happened, I'm afraid of messing it up." Lena's other hand came up to cup his cheek, turning his face towards hers. "Life's too short to let fear hold you back, Andrei. Sometimes you've got to take a leap of faith." And with that she leaned in and kissed him. It was soft and sweet and felt like coming home. When they finally pulled apart, both slightly breathless, Andrei rested his forehead against hers. "You're right," he said. "No more playing it safe. From now on, I'm all in." 6 months later, Andrei found himself in a familiar position, standing in front of a mirror, adjusting his bow tie. But this time, he felt nothing but excitement and joy instead of dread. The door opened, and Big Boy stuck his head in. "You ready, man? It's showtime." Andrei grinned, giving himself one last look in the mirror. "More ready than I've ever been." The crowd's roar washed over him as he stepped onto the stage. His band, The Love Below, had exploded onto the music scene in the past few months, their unique blend of funk, hip-hop, and soul capturing audiences across the country. Andrei grabbed the mic, eyes scanning the crowd until they landed on a familiar face in the front row. Lena beamed at him, her hazel eyes shining with pride and love. "How y'all feeling tonight?" Andrei called out to the audience. They responded with enthusiastic cheers. "All right, all right, all right. We've got a special show for you tonight. This first song goes out to the woman who taught me that sometimes you've got to shake things up to find your true rhythm." As the opening chords of their hit single, "Shake It Like a Polaroid Picture," filled the arena, Andrei locked eyes with Lena again. At that moment, he knew with absolute certainty that walking away from that wedding was the best decision he'd ever made. Life was unpredictable, messy, and sometimes painful. But it was also beautiful, exciting, and full of unexpected joys. As long as he had his music, his friends, and Lena by his side, Andrei was ready to face whatever came next, one shake at a time.